All right. It's Jeff Mayhew. It's John Beatty. It's Politics and Parenting, where we talk about politics, but we talk about it differently. John, how you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Jeff. How are you?
I made myself some wings and they're a little spicy. So like you ever
Mm.
I'm old now, so you got like that acid reflex, you get a
Oh,
little
that's the worst. Yeah, it
yeah.
goes right through your stomach.
But yeah, my kids really wanted daddy to cook. I haven't cooked in a while and broke out the old uh wing recipe, made garlic parmesan buffalo wings and like an Asian zing sauce. It was really good, but dad's like, I'm old.
Do you do the double fry? Will you fry them once and then let them sit and then fry them again? Or you like a bake them? How do you prepare your
So
wings?
I do a double dredge. Okay. I think the double
Okay.
dredge is important for getting it crispy, and then you do like an extra fry. So it's not that I double fry them, but like it's like 10 minutes, and then like I pull them out, kind of shake them, and then put them right back in 5 more minutes. So I guess it's kind of a double fry,
Yeah.
but yeah, they get nice and crispy. The kids love them. So
That's awesome. Yeah, there's this Korean fried chicken chain called Banchan,
oh
which
yeah.
does the double fry. And they're just like, it's unbeatable. It's
Yeah.
my favorite wings by far.
Yeah. So, while I was cooking, I was thinking about something, John. I've been thinking, and I just want to propose you a few thoughts here.
All right.
What if I were to tell you that what led us to civil war was an imbalance of power caused by a manipulation of our representation, the three-fifths compromise, realistically.
I believe it.
Um, and that led to bad leaders, which
Mhm.
ultimately led us to the Civil War. And then I've been thinking about this. I'm like, what are we going through right now? Well, since 1911, we capped our house. What did that do? It manipulated our representation. Okay, so what did that do? It created an imbalance of power. Citizen to representative ratio has gone from one in
Mhm.
220,000 to one in 756,000. That has shifted power. That's created an imbalance. And what has that done? It's led to bad leaders.
Yeah.
Look, right or left, we have bad leaders spread all across the spectrum right now. Does that mean that we're destined to war? Or is there a solution?
Well, like anything, when you're driving and you don't change direction, you're going to get the destination you're going to. So, is it a chance that we're gonna? And I would say, saying we're gonna go to war is a big thing, but like I would agree with you that we're in the midst of a lot of upheaval. We've got an economy that seems to be shifting and changing underneath our feet, and we don't have leaders that understand it. And so the fact that we've got bad leaders in Washington, we've got a lot of systemic changes happening to the economy and to our day-to-day lives. It's going to lead to huge problems down the road. And I'd point to this bank collapse on Friday, which was really interesting because it was just a couple of like little levers that seemed to get pulled in the wrong direction, and then boom, you've got a bank that in the grand scheme of things isn't too big, but it was running the payroll for a lot of companies out in San Francisco. So yeah, I think if we don't change direction, we're in for really bad times. If it's not a war, which I, pray God that doesn't happen, but it's going to be some kind of big social upheaval that's going to be bad for everyone. I can
Right.
guarantee you that.
So I've been thinking like, I know this sounds crazy. I think the answer is actually very easy, right? It's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of time, right? But it's actually very
That
easy.
doesn't sound easy, Jeff.
I mean, I guess like it's not
It's
difficult.
simple. It's very simple.
Think of it like cooking a meal, right?
Yeah.
Like the idea of cooking those wings. What do we have to do? We had to create, like I did this with my kids today. We had to build the dredge. Okay. We
Hmm.
had to, which means we have to get all the ingredients for that, put it all together. We've got to make the ranch sauce from scratch. We've got to make the buffalo sauce from scratch. We've got to make the Asian zing sauce from scratch. Each one of those has an ingredient, right? And we have to
Hmm.
measure them out and we have to put them together. And you have to fry off your chicken. You have to, we had to make coleslaw. That was one of the sides, right? So we have to make the coleslaw dressing. We got to shred the cabbage and the carrots and all that. And you do this and you think at the beginning, you're like, man, this is a lot of work. I don't
Yeah.
know if I want to do all this. It seems complicated and hard. But when you break it down in small little steps, it's not really that hard, right? And if you have somebody leading you, good leaders, it's actually
Hmm.
very enjoyable to do. Something that my son and I like to do together is cook. So thinking about that, I'm like, how can we solve this very large problem? I think the answer is actually very easy. we just try. Right?
Yeah.
Like we like I tell myself, you find leaders, okay, encourage them to lead, and then elect better leaders. And so like that's where I think what our organization is targeted at, right? Is what we want to do is we want to engage our citizens, because ultimately the problem is a manipulation of the representation. So the solution is for the representation to hold the people in charge accountable. And in order to do that, you need the right tools. And at the Madisonian Republicans, like our focus is giving the right tools to our communities so they can elect better leaders or become better leaders. And we want to be able to do that without costing an arm and a leg, because that's part of the problem, right? It's a wealth barrier. Regular people don't have a chance to govern themselves again. We want to give it to them through information and, tools.
Yeah, and it's not, not necessarily, and the leadership is incredibly important. Like you need a chef in the kitchen who understands what's going on and can follow the recipe. But I think the recipe is key, and I think that's the other thing too. Like if you read history, and we're trying to, you don't have to read as many books as Jeff when you come to our meetings. We're distilling it into sort of the key concepts, sort of a recipe that anyone can follow in terms of getting better leadership, sort of what people look for historically, what allows someone to come to power, and then like what's the how do you actually govern when you're in power, and how do you make things better, and sort of what has worked, the good recipes versus the bad recipes, the things that haven't worked.
One of the things I notice about leaders that work is leaders that come from humble beginnings, right? And if I were to tell you, like, who is the most famous leader that comes from humble beginnings, who would you say?
Oh, there's a lot of them. I could say
Oh
Barack
no, like
Obama.
the number one. No, no, oh no.
Oh
Number
yeah,
one humble leader of all time. I
probably
think
Abraham
it's
Lincoln.
Jesus.
Oh Jesus. Well, he's the deck stacked with. He's got the deck stacked with him. It's got it.
But so like at church this morning.
But that's a good point. Like he picked, he is God. He didn't come into sort of the Egyptian palaces and stuff. He came into a humble carpenter's
Right.
house.
I mean, God placed him there. He was like, hey, I want my son to lead these people. I'm not going to put him at the top of the pyramid. I'm going to put him at
Mhm.
the bottom, right? Because I want him to lead the people realistically. And that's like, it kind of like solidified my idea of what great leadership comes from when I heard that story at church this morning. I was like, he is trying to tell us something, right? Like he's speaking through us and through the Bible and through all these different people. And he's like, oh, he's trying to tell us something with this. And, you look at John Adams, you look at Abraham Lincoln, you know, there are a lot of leaders that come from humble beginnings, and they typically are pretty darn good. I mean, if you look at all of our founders, Alexander Hamilton is like, he's not humble beginning. He's like, should have never ever survived
Never
beginning.
had a chance. Yeah.
He never had a chance, and he made something of him. George Washington was humble beginnings. Thomas Jefferson was a little, he was closer to the privileged class, but still, like, just in the time period, in like the society that they had, they just didn't have a big opulent society. So even your upper class at that period of time still wasn't that far away from the people compared to what you have now, or what you had back
Mhm.
then in the crown, right?
Right.
And so like I think that's something that we should focus on, as citizens. Is like, all right, well, where do these people come from? How far are they from the problem? Where do they live? If you live too far away from the solutions that you're trying to call, the problems you're trying to solve, then you're probably not the best person to be solving them. We should make sure you're running in a district that fits you.
Yeah.
And as citizens, we have to hold them accountable. Be like, hey, you don't belong running here. Like, run somewhere else. Run for the Senate. Let one of us run for the spot where we belong. you know
No, I got that sense just walking through the Louvre last week. Speaking of upper class opportunities, I mean, like you look at the jewelry and the ostentation that the French nobility had, and all I could think was like, this is pretty cool stuff. But I could see why people were revolted, because if you don't feel like not if you don't feel like it, but if you know for a fact you're not getting, you've got huge problems in terms of there's poverty and starvation. There's talking about like endless wars that we talk about now. Like there were truly endless wars of just like the nobility of all these countries fighting with each other, bringing people in, the soldiers ransacking the countryside and stuff, and affecting everyday citizens. Like, there's big issues that were happening that the elite at the time probably didn't really feel and didn't understand and
Right.
had nothing to do. Now, you can get away with that if there isn't a sort of an information flow. But if you think about the French Revolution, like, that's, you look at your this country you just helped win their own revolution, and then you've got Thomas Jefferson is over there as the envoy, like, talking about how great freedom is. You start to get a little jealous, and you start to think like, we could do better. Now, the French Revolution was very bloody, probably definitely mistakes were made, but like, that's the kind of thing that I think we wanted to avoid on the Madison Republicans, is sort of a peaceful change, a peaceful understanding of what the problems are, recognizing that there's always systemic changes, there's always cycles to these things, and really what you need is someone in the driver's seat who understands what's going on and can bring things, park peacefully, park without hitting anyone.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, not just to the highest bidder, right? Like, just because
Yeah,
the
yeah,
person can be the loudest person in the room because they can pay for more advertising doesn't mean that what they have to say is actually like valuable, right? Like, as individual citizens, we need to be able to recognize that. We need to be able to amplify voices that are thoughtful and, problem solving as opposed to problem causing. And then we need to be able to turn the TV off, turn the social media off, turn it off to the people that are leading us in the wrong way. We don't stop arguing with them. Just ignore them, right? Like, that's the biggest thing we got to do. Is like, it becomes less profitable if you just stop watching them. It's a train wreck. But so, like, I was wondering, John, what would you say is another like good quality for a leader is that you've noticed through your study of history?
I think it's an ability to listen. That's not only is it communicating, but it's also understanding the problems that the people underneath, that you represent, that maybe you don't necessarily represent, but your decisions affect, understanding their context or situation there before a decision gets made. Now, sometimes you make a decision that they don't appreciate, but that doesn't mean that you can't still listen to them. People appreciate being listened to.
Right. I mean,
I don't know. What do you think?
So, I mean, one of the things that I noticed the most is like the best leaders are like they read like madmen and they write. So, like, they have to focus in that. James Madison, he read all of history, it seems like, right? He read anything that people would go. He was writing. He was writing his letters to Jefferson. He was writing letters to the Federalist Papers, right? You look at Lincoln, he read a lot. Ronald Reagan read a lot. Teddy Roosevelt read a lot. Teddy Roosevelt was writing books about nature, like, as soon as he like was able to like be an adult. I mean, he was writing historical books about the Navy and John Adams, right? And he deplored Thomas Jefferson, right? And what that did for them is it allowed them to, by being a student of history, they were able to layer the problems on top of each other. They were able to see what happened in the past and try to make better decisions for the future. And then the other thing it does for them is it helps them communicate, right? FDR was a reader. And if you study these people, this is where they excel. James Madison excelled in the art of communication. Now, he is different than the rest of the leaders on the list because his art of communication was to like a small structure in his intellectual circle. That's why I think he is harder for regular Americans to grasp his like brilliance than the other leaders. But that's who he had to reach, right? That was his target market back then. You look at Lincoln. He was a masterful communicator. He was able to have these homespun stories that related to people, that drew them in. What did Teddy Roosevelt do? He was able to use the bully pulpit, explain problems to the regular everyday citizen. He walked the streets of New York, right? Like, even though Teddy was like born of a higher class society, he understood the value of everyday citizens, and he made sure he put his feet in those shoes and he walked the same walk that they did so he could better lead them. Same thing with FDR. He had the fireside chats. And what was the thing about FDR that brought him to the people was his getting polio, because this guy was super privileged, right? Like, just
he was
privileged. but he gets
Upper
polio.
East Side, Upper West Side, something like that.
Yeah, he gets polio, and he he goes for treatment, and he kind of connects with all these polio patients. He ends up spending a lot of his time and his money on helping that clinic, build out to help people. And I think what he learns from that is he's able to take all of that knowledge that he's gained from being a student and learn how to communicate through his skills that way. And then he's able to take it and communicate to the American people. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what makes a really great leader. As citizens, I mean, those are all examples of presidents that are great leaders. I think, where should we have our focus? And I say this all the time, is in our representation, right? But it doesn't mean we can't find those leaders at a representation level, right? I think what we need to acknowledge about our system and the greatness and the flaws is it's been really great, but it's been very centralized towards the top. And it's survived off of great leaders, but we just need more of them. Realistically, as society has gotten bigger and bigger and there's more people, we just need more of them. We need more of them at the representative level. So like,
Mm-hmm.
what is our focus at the Madisonian Republicans? It is giving the people the tools to elect better leaders, and they should be focusing on their like delegates and their federal representations or representatives. And you can find those same qualities in everyday people that can be there, right? And maybe that person ends up being president one day, right? But they got to start somewhere. And that's what our meeting's about this weekend, right? Is representation.
Representation is communication. No, I think that like that's the wisdom of the crowds in a certain sense is you allow people to speak, you'll get different voices, but it's an opportunity to convince other people to come along with you, to sell an idea, to eventually, to polish and hone that. And I think that could be what's so missing is that you just kind of you outsource everything to you talk about like the readers, the leaders that you respect are readers. Sorry, man. Your pod keeps going out, so I can listen to you. Like I think we've outsourced so much of that sort of reading to people in academia, like sort of, oh well, you went to Harvard, so you must be really well educated and really well read.
Right.
But I think we can all see with the way that we fight about the attendance quotas and stuff. Like you've got students who are basically who have they've got the numbers, they've got the credentials and stuff, but because they fall into a certain racial category, they're not allowed to. They're not given admission. So what does that tell you about the academic standard of an institution? Really, it's about just having the name behind you and then having that 400 years, what is it? Harvard's about 400 years or something like that all that credibility behind you. And that's your education that you can kind of use as a bully pulpit. You don't really know anything,
Right.
I think that's the worst part about it is that we outsource so much of our trust to people and say, well, they're associated with this institution, so they must be X, Y, or Z. When in reality, that's not the case. But we don't, there's no opportunity to do due diligence because we don't ask them questions, don't hold them to them. We don't expect them to make themselves available, and so it's just a matter of we get stuck with stodgy leadership.
Well, and so that's what we want to focus on this weekend, right? Is our
Mm-hmm.
representation and how to ask our representation the right questions, right? So we talk about it all the time. Representation is three things. It's communication, it's power, and it's our responsibility, right? It is how we communicate to power. That's our representative. It's how we get things done, which makes it our power too. And it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to hold that representative accountable. So how can we do that? Well, when you're thinking about who to run for, whether at the representative level of the federal government or the delegate level at the state government in Virginia, what you should be doing is look at your person's website. Look at what they're saying to you. Are they telling you how they're going to solve problems, or are they pointing the finger at somebody else? Are they pointing the problems out but not giving you any plausible way to solve them? Are they telling you they're going to stand against something, or are they telling you how they're going to fix something? Are they giving you the tools and the education so you can help them fix it, or are they just asking you for money? These are important questions that we need to ask ourselves. What do you think about that, John?
I completely agree. So there's a guy running for House of Delegates nearby, and he sent out an email. And Katie asked me, "Oh, you should go to this kickoff," kind of tongue in cheek. But I was like, "Oh no, I know exactly what he stands because he checks off all these boxes of He's got a military background. He's got a family. I was actually shocked that there wasn't like a small business ownership aspect of there, but because that just like there's the cliche and cliche and cliche and cliche,
Right.
and it's basically, you know, you can, because I fit this mold that you've been told is important, you need to elect me. There's nothing else behind it. I know nothing about this guy other than, and let me, he said the Democrats in Richmond are making things worse. And it's just
How?
like,
What are they
yeah,
doing?
exactly.
How are you
What are
going
they
to stop
doing?
them?
What
Sorry.
you know, and maybe it doesn't have to be. Maybe there are issues that everyone can agree on. Like, are you just going to say, well, you're a Democrat, I can't stand with you at all? Or are you going to say, like, what's important for Virginia? What's important for making things better? Um, there's, I'm thinking of, I'm reading this Wall Street Journal article about broadband access in rural areas. And right now, interestingly enough, there's huge fights between internet service providers that get federal money to roll out broadband, and
Mhm.
then the local power companies, or big power companies, but the power companies with the poles that the utilities are kind of expecting to just rent out. You know, they're like, the poles are, going back to a lot of infrastructure, are, some of them are in need of repair. And there's a fight now about who is going to pay for fixing these poles. And so the power company is like, well, the ISPs have to pay for it because they're the ones who are going to benefit from this. And then the ISPs are like, no, the power companies have to pay for it because it's their poles, and they're basically getting free lunch. And so like, we're just fighting over this two corporations, going back to your corporations fighting with each other, and we're kind of left out because we need, for example, in the 21st century, like, we pretty much all agree that internet access is incredibly important for everyone and it should be available, but kids can't get internet access. uh, Companies can't get internet access, people can't get internet access because you've got big corporations fighting it out to figure out who's going to pay to fix a stinking telephone pole. Like,
Right.
that's what's important, you know. And it's, I mean, it's maybe not important in Northern Virginia, but there are pockets that don't have internet access, but it's important for Virginia as a whole.
Right.
Virginia has a couple of local electrical cooperatives, but there's a big 800-pound gorilla called Dominion Electricity that donates to whatever representatives it thinks are going to help further its cause. Like, I would say, like, you know, throw that into it, an email. Like, I'm going to make electrical rates more, you know, maybe you can't say they're cheaper just because of it, but I'm going to make them more predictable so that you as a family aren't hit with raising electrical costs as everything else is going up, because we have this grid that is underserved, you know, doesn't serve the population. Of like, that's a real issue to run on, not like, oh, the Democrats. Let me tell you about the Democrats. Like, come
Well, I
on.
mean, how are you so look, the system, like if you really want to understand the system, what is it? It is the system. It is a system of communication. It's a system
Mm-hmm.
of debate, right? And how do you make the system work? You say what you believe and you convince other people to come along with you and vote with you, right?
Well, that's
So
not what the consultants tell me,
how are
Jeff.
you supposed to do your job as a representative if during the campaign you make the other team their team name, if you turn it into a bad word, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the D word now, right? And
Yeah.
like, you really think you're going to get somebody to come along with you, even on things that we should agree on that are local issues that affect our homes, our families? Like, when you turn them into the enemy, you're restricting your ability to do your job. And like,
Right.
that is something that you should be aware of as a citizen. Like, this isn't just stay home and be like, oh, I'm not going to vote for that guy. No, go out and run against him. Go out
Yeah.
and find somebody else to run against him. Or, you know what? If they're the only ones on the ticket, show up at their events and hold them accountable. When they get off stage, be like, I don't like what you said. I don't like the fact that you're turning my neighbor, my family into the enemy. I want you to tell me what you're going to do to solve my problems. I want you to tell me how you're going to get that done. And then I want you to be quiet and get off the stage. Don't ask me for money and don't ask me to door knock for you until you're going to do your job, pick up a book, and understand what's going on. Sorry, I got a little like heated there
Tell me
for
how you really feel, Jeff.
like I was, yeah, sorry. Uh I guess just watching bad leadership from up close is hard. I'm
No,
triggered.
I mean, like, that's the amazing thing about humans. Like, I went to this talk, and what makes us human is that we strive for perfection. Like, we understand that there are deficiencies, but we want to make things better. Like, there's deficiencies in our day-to-day lives, and so we try
Yeah.
to maybe find another job. We try to do better at our job. We try to have a better house for our family, like material things like that. But there's also just like we understand like society is broken. And for example, going back to polio, like people get polio. Maybe I can use my resources to help children with polio. There's people with poverty. Maybe I can use my resources to help people with poverty. There's families that are being hurt by inflation. Like that's the key Republican talking point is the Biden inflation is messing everything up. But like, what are you going to do about it? Like, how are you actually going to make it better? You know, my grocery bill goes up by $100 every month and $200 every month, and it affects everything else that I can do. You know, and like, how are you actually going to make that better? Like, what do you understand enough of the economy in order to come back and say like, oh yeah, this is the things that we could tweak. We could maybe pull some of the money out of the system. You know, have a little bit of a deflationary effect to help everyone. Like, you know, sure, it may hurt some people. You know, there'll be some people that will suffer because of that, but in the grand scheme of things, it's better for more people if you can slow inflation. Like I think like
You
that
know the
those are
best way
things.
to do that? Lower the minimum wage. The best way to do that is to lower the minimum wage. If you lower the minimum wage, you can now create more competition in the marketplace. You can allow smaller businesses to grow faster, right? Because who are the ones that raise minimum wage? Did the government raise minimum wage, or did big business raise minimum wage?
I'll tell
And
you who. You know who.
why did they raise minimum wage, right? And if you're a small business owner, you should know. I mean, I'm a small business owner because that made us raise our pay, right? And we
Mhm.
don't have like the massive backing that you do. So now like our prices go up that are already, you know, struggling to compete. Who eats that cost? Well, it's the business owner, right? It's his ability to buy a new equipment. It's his ability to hire more staff. So if you lower the minimum wage, right? Now what's going to happen is big businesses are going to start to lower their pay too. In the entry level jobs, you're going to create actual entry level job positions again, because right now you don't, because you've raised it so high. I have a small business. There's no reason I can't pay a high school kid $10 an hour to fold shirts. If that's their
Mhm.
job, like why can't I pay him $10 an hour? It's absolutely absurd.
It doesn't
Um,
have, and like you could say, it doesn't have to be a full-time job either. It's like they come to after school for a couple hours. Like that's a great job to start out of high school.
but you can't do that because every high
Yeah.
school kid wants to work at Target for $15 an hour, and they don't really do anything there. They're just eating up pay. They're hiding in the halls. Like I literally email our interview kids, and they're like, they'll tell me that they're like, yeah, it's just easier to work there. This seems hard, right? So like you, and it's not to say that those kids would come and necessarily work for me, right? But by leveling out that pay, now I can pay higher, and it means more in the marketplace now, right?
Mhm.
You know, if you're paying the kid at Target $8 an hour, as opposed to 15, now they're the $15 an hour at a place like mine has more value,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm able to have better staff, better labor. I'm able to grow my business and help my local economy more. We're not dependent on big corporation to run things. And what do you have? You have a deflationary period, right? Because by lowering pay, you're lowering the cost of goods realistically. And you're also creating competition all at the same time. So you're going to be able to create more jobs, create more local revenue, create more tax revenue on top of that. I think it's the easiest way to get out of this bubble that we've created, right? Is not to pop the bubble, but to let the bubble slowly settle down.
Yeah.
And then we will start to create it again. I mean, that's just the way things work.
Right. But it creates with what people can understand. I mean, like, so the whole thing with the minimum wage, going back to like who's pushing for that, it's the CEO of Panera. He wants a higher minimum wage so that he can justify paying for robots in order to take people's wage. So it's actually not only is hurting small businesses, but it's actually providing for fewer job opportunities for people because it's more expensive. Like you said, it's more expensive to hire, and then they're just going to hire robots because, well, if I'm going to pay 80,000 for a person, or I can pay 60,000 for a robot, I'll rather pay 60,000 for a robot.
Right. And so what are they doing? They're replacing the labor market, right? Like their
Mhm.
whole focus is jack the price up, corner the market, pay for this new technology that we want to invest in so we can fire all these people, right? I
Mhm.
mean, all the new drivers that Amazon hired over the COVID period, right? With all the bonuses they paid and the overtime and stuff. And they're like openly trying to replace those jobs. The people that are moving there on a short-term basis. You have, excuse me, you have to think long-term as a citizen. You have to think long term as, you know, for getting a job. And if the place that you're working for is trying to replace your job, maybe that's not the place you should be working for, right? Like, do they really value you?
No, that's the whole Uber's evaluation is based on the fact that they were going to invest billions of dollars into a self-driving vehicle so that they could replace their entire driver fleet. So they built this whole network on people that would come and work as gig workers. They said, oh, gig workers are so great. We love gig workers. But that's their right hand. And then their left hand is going and spending billions of dollars trying to build out an autonomous driving fleet so that they can replace all the gig workers. So like, it's just, I think you need leaders to understand that.
Well, yeah, you need leaders who understand that. We got a little off track of our representation talk, but I mean, it is important because you need to be able to communicate that. You need somebody communicating with you, right?
Mhm.
This needs to be a topic of discussion amongst your community. And what we find when we look at our campaign websites of the people running for local office, we find a bunch of rhetoric. That's it, right?
That's
a bunch of empty promises and questions about donations and volunteering. And it's like, okay, cool. You want my money. You want me to work for you. What are you going to do for me? Right? That's what every citizen realistically wants, right?
They're going to text you and ask for another donation unless you donate. That's what they want.
Well, and that's the thing that drives me nuts. And we had this in our we had that data collection when we ran for office, right? The primary. Mm-hmm. If you tried to vote in the Republican primary, the Republican Party data collected you, right? They made you fill out and sign a waiver that you are a pledge that you would support whoever the nominee was by voting. You were pledging that by that vote, you would vote for whoever in the general election, which is like so icky to ask. It's so like authoritarian and like a manipulation of people to do in the first place. So whoever was in charge of that at District 10, shame on you, number one. Number two, what did they really want that for? They wanted your email address and phone number so they could text you about Nikki Haley running for president, right? Like, that's why they want it. Because if you voted, I'm sure you're getting those text messages, right? You're getting, and you got them when Yesley was running for office. You get them constantly. And then they bombard you with emails. Like, I'm on the email list for every single delegate running for Republicans in the state of Virginia, and I didn't sign up for them, right? Everybody running for school board, everything is coming through my email box now, and they're not even in my district. So they're like overloading me with information simply because they collected it, they put it into a database, and they're just giving it away, or most likely they're probably selling it. I don't know. But like, somebody's getting that information.
It's a quid pro quo. So and this is the way it works in campaign finance. If you were to just give someone a list, that would be a donation. But if you swap lists, it's just a quid pro quo, and there's no monetary. So that's what's going on, and that's how you get on like just random lists all over, because someone swapped lists, and then someone else swaps lists, and then by the time the sun sets, you're on 1,000 more lists.
Yeah, and again, that like goes back is like, what can you do as a citizen, and that is hold these people accountable.
Yeah.
Listen to what they're saying, and then let them know what they're saying. Speak it back to them. Be like, hey, all you said is divisive things. Hey, all you said were problems. How are you going to fix this problem? And then don't let them get off stage. Like, make them answer your question. And when they can't, don't vote for them, and I'll find somebody else to vote for. Or, you know what the great part is there are a lot of people running for office who probably could answer these problems, right? But they actually say the other things because they want to win, and they think it's their only way to win. So like, as citizens, if you provide the environment for good candidates to exist, then good candidates will exist.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I, as I always said when I was running, people would congratulate me on running for office, and I say it's easy. You just file some paperwork and ask people to vote for you. So if you're unhappy with who's running in your district, just file some paperwork and run against them. It's not a lot. And then the next thing someone will say, well, you got to start asking all your friends and family for donations. And I'll let that, you can figure that, you can solve that problem in terms of what you're going to bring to it. But like, it is just a matter of like, again, like, why do people ask for donations? Because it's just trying to make it easier. Well, they think it's going to make it easier to reach out to people, but really, you door knock and you go out to events, and I think this idea of sitting in a public place and trying to talk to people, I think is key. And I think that like that's the way it's going to have to be in the future, especially with the way social media is, and they're trying to shy away from politics and stuff. So that's not an avenue anymore. Not that it
Right.
ever really was, but I think some people got successful, and so we all think it's important.
Right.
But it, like you do, and this is something I struggle with, being kind of shy. Like you do have to put yourself out there, and you have to put yourself at people's doorsteps in front of them and be like, do you know there's an election? Do you know who's running? I'm running. I'm one of those people. Let me tell you what I'm running on. Like I think that's all it takes.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, that's hard. I mean, I went door knocking yesterday. I sent my kids door knocking today. Um, and so like, yeah, it is a really difficult thing. And I think it's even more difficult post COVID because like nobody just like used to people coming to their house anymore, except for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
guy. um, but so if people want to help and they're like, all right, I got to learn government. I got to learn
Mhm.
about representation. What if I want to like help now, but I don't have like I'm not doing any of those. John, is there anything that like people can do to like help us out?
Well, speaking of how important social media may or may not be, we do need some help with the social media aspect of the Madison Republicans. If you like to tweet, if you like to press that like button, you can help us out on that. We need people who have sort of a business acumen, and not just like necessarily soliciting donations, but in terms of like managing a business. Like, that can be its own full-time job.
Right.
You and I both have full-time jobs, and we're trying to do the podcast. We're trying to do our own reading and research and outreach and stuff. We need education is someone who's a teacher, like, and works in education. Like it's incredibly difficult and expensive in terms of time and effort. And if people want to help us with that, where they dive into certain areas and they said like, this is what I've got back. Like you gave Craig a job of looking into corporations, and he sort of went into there and figured out like, kind of the crux of like, what is a corporation? Where does it come from? And that's hours and hours of research that you were able to leverage someone else's interests and talents and abilities in order to do that. It's like if you've got ideas, areas that sort of you think you can access, like, come help us do some research, do some reading, and
Right.
then you can come teach at one of our events.
Right.
Speaking of events, we need to like running events is its own little thing. Like
Right.
just the details that go into that. If you want to help us put on our monthly events, if you want to help us sort of going back to like beating the bushes, like getting people to have sort of events in their home. Like I
Right.
think like someone who can help with that, with just the details around that, logistics of that. Like it's one thing to say like, yeah, we'll have a meet and greet on this day, and it's another thing to say like, what does that mean? Like, do we have space? Do we have food? Do we have a guest list?
Yeah, I mean, I sent my kids door knocking today and I told them knock on the doors, tell them what we're doing, and ask them if they can spare 20 minutes for dad to talk to them. And I sent them to my neighbor's house. And I said, anybody that wants to have a meeting, get their phone number. I'll call and set up a time with them to come over. And I said, give them one of these packets. It's our Republic packet from last month, right? Like show them that like
Mhm.
this is serious. This is real.
Yeah.
Like we're not messing around. And we can make it as comfortable as possible, right? Like and having people on our team, there's five of us right now, right?
Mhm.
Five of us right now, and you mentioned like the work. I mean, everybody has helped build out these classes, right? Every single person in this group has helped build or write something for these classes. The thing that Craig did is like a piece that I'm working on for Citizens United and the First Amendment. And so like that was really important. Individual rights plays a factor versus corporate rights, and it's great to have like that teammate to be able to carry that load for me, because like you said, we got full-time jobs, we got big families, right? Like we're struggling with time here, but we do think it's really important. We're trying to help our community. Events coordinator, social media coordinator, basically I want a CEO, I need a business manager. Realistically, I mean, they're volunteer positions. The way that I look at the problem that we have, it's a labor versus capital. Everything is a labor versus capital problem, whether it's in business or government. Right now, the capital has the advantage. I mean, we have somebody. I think. Do you know how much you get paid for a delegate to run or to like in the state of Virginia?
I want to say it's $14,000 a year.
Okay, I think it's 17, but that's
Is it okay? Maybe
more confident that
adjusted
it's
for
17.
inflation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, think about this. Like, we have people that are running for office as delegates who are donating over $20,000 to their own campaign just so they can run for office when they're only going to get paid $17,000.
Hmm.
That's a wealth barrier, right? Like
Right.
we that's a That's a capital. That means capital can run for office, labor can't. How do you counteract capital? You devalue your labor and you work harder. So we, as citizens, have to work for free. We have to create political organizations and work for free for them. And how we can counterbalance that is having more people work for us than them, and we just sharing the load, right? So like it's a part-time gig, but it's something that we need people that are committed to do, that really want to make change. So like I said, events coordinator, volunteer coordinator, business manager, education director. I've taken that role myself as far as writing the classes, but we still need people on the education team. We need a policy leader. We need people on the policy team. There's lots of positions. We should post them. We'll post them in the show notes as well. And then, if you're interested, reach out. Like, let's have a conversation. Like, you don't have to make a commitment. Come learn about what we're doing and see if it's the right fit for you, right? It's got to be the right fit for us too. Like, we got to be able to mesh and work together. But I've met so many people over the last couple of years, and I can tell you, like, anyone's capable of doing all of this, right?
Yeah.
As long as you've got the right team around you to help guide you in the ways that you need to go, and it's the thing that you love to do, right? If you're, an artistic person, you want to be, maybe a designer or something for literature, like you can be a part of that. I was talking to a friend at dinner the other night, and he was talking about how he had like 3 jobs, but he was like, they were all things that I love to do. So it was like a labor of love, right? There are all things in this business that will fit somebody's labor of love, and if you want to do more, you want to help your community, you want to help your country realistically, maybe help us out, like
We're worth your time. We promise.
I mean, we're trying, right? Like, and like I said, give people the tools, give people the opportunity, give them the recipe, right? We're bringing it back to that cooking
Yeah,
earlier.
that's right. Yeah, it's of all the ingredients that come together, and I think we've got a good recipe with Madison Republicans, and the more ingredients we can bring to it, the more. I think in this case, the more chefs, the better.
Right, absolutely. Oh man, well, that was a good podcast there, John. What do you think?
That was good. It's good.
I'm excited for our meeting on Saturday. I'll be disappearing into my laptop for the next like 14 hours, writing all the literature that's
March 18th, people,
in my head, but haven't put onto a computer yet because, let's face it, I'm a procrastinator. I'm almost a procrastinator and a perfectionist, which means I never want to start anything because I know that I'll disappear until it's perfect, and like I won't be able to stop, and that's not really great for my family sometimes. So I'm like, when can I do it? Late at night on a Sunday when everybody's asleep.
Speaking of, I don't know if we want to go to the self-help, but one thing I've been trying to do is like, if there's something I really want to do, I just said like, I'm just gonna do 15 minutes. If I just set a timer for 15 minutes and I just do it, and then it's not as big when the deadline comes and you're still not done. But like it's amazing what you can get done with every day with just 15 minutes doing one particular thing. So that's my self-help advice.
Yeah,
may or may not be work for you.
Well, no, so I mean, I do that. I guess the way that I work is I work inside my head first, and then I put it on paper. So like I'll do 15 minutes. I've been doing it since the principal's first conference, where I'll do 15 minutes of like, what is my representation of is communication like going to be? And I've already made a video for this, and I already have like a bunch of slides that I made, a month ago. And then it's like, all right, how am I going to connect this to people? What am I going to teach them in this class? And so like I take, I've got probably 5 pages in here of notes of all those thoughts. And then today I literally just sat in my chair and just like visualized all the artwork I was going to create. And then now it's just a matter of like doing it, like putting what's in my head onto the computer and drawing it. But that's when I get lost, right? Because once I start drawing it, it's like I can't stop. Like I got to finish. That's just how my body acts. So it'll be all right.
It'll be all right. It won't be all right. It'll be great. You should all come March 18th, Giuseppe's Haymarket.
That's right. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. So, all right. Well, like John said, the next meeting is this Saturday, Giuseppe's 4 to 6 p.m. RSVP at MadisonianRepublicans.com. We've got articles coming out weekly at Politics and Parenting. You can subscribe, like, share, comment, We appreciate it. And as always, peace and love.